Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1178. Can't Leave the House Empty. Carl took Dana to the guild house first, where he created a low stone wall outside the barrier all around the property, as the old one had disintegrated centuries ago and was currently just a rubble pile in a few spots. Then he used royal rank nature stones to make healing totems at all four corners of the property, with the gems buried deep in the wall, using earth manipulation. You should add gargoyles. Oh, and a maid. Orthos would like a maid. We have plenty of stones from the clothing sales, Tian suggested. The little fox wasn't wrong. They had hundreds of overlord rank and higher elemental stones available, and even more if they opened a portal so they could access the guild bank. You look like you're talking to someone, Dana asked. Tian thinks that we should leave some staff members at the guild house for orthos. Perhaps an illusionary cleaning staff and some gargoyles. Dana smiled. What about an upgraded spell? You have a skill that's letting you blend other skills to make some of the strange abilities that your team has, right? What if I give you greater golem? Could you make better staff members? Carl smiled. I think that I could. Greater golems and gargoyles should make greater gargoyles if my guess is right. And the original gargoyles are already pretty good. Dana handed him a skill book with a smile, and in his mind Tian laughed. Ray will be so excited about those. He cheered. Carl focused on trying to combine greater golem and gargoyle, but the result was not what he expected. Instead of greater gargoyle, he got epic golem. Champion Carl offers knowledge skill epic golem. Will be transferred to his lovely Dana mage. That's not what I expected. What does it even summon? Dana asked. I have absolutely no idea. Carl replied with a shrug. We probably shouldn't test this within the city. Dana realized. Yeah, that's the smart move. I will put gargoyles in the guild house and an illusionary staff member spell. Orthos will know how to properly operate them. Carl agreed. Gargoyles took some time to engrave into the backside of the new wall, but the solid illusion was created by Opal in a matter of seconds. She had all those slices of low-grade illusion stone, and if they were just making maids, they didn't need to be powerful. Just a bunch of ascended rank bunnies in maid dresses would be enough to keep the house in working order and the guests entertained. Nobody didn't like bunnies. Carl laughed as he made them a bunch of cleaning rings so that they could more effectively maintain the house, and then gave them their first orders to keep the place clean and host authorized guests or inform the gargoyles of unauthorized ones. Bunnies? Dana asked as the new staff ran into the house to get to work. Opal made them. Everyone likes bunnies. Carl explained with a smirk. Yes, that is part of the problem. You know how Orthos feels about strangers with muddy feet in his space. Dana reminded him. Kara had told everyone the story of the first time that she had been in a beast god temple. In a way that made her seem innocent naturally. And certainly not like she had tracked muddy footprints across the roof just to see if they would chase her. Kara nodded in agreement while laying on her back in the Lich Lord sarcophagus, which was now loaded with gold coins to make the interior into a badger-shaped recliner. The gargoyles were active now, looking like traditional gargoyles, and Carl decided to call the guild house finished. It had healing guards and cleaners. Orthos could take care of the rest. With the guild house finished, they moved on to the nearest fountain. They were slowly gathering spectators as they walked, due mostly to the quality of the outfits that they were wearing. It wasn't their fanciest, but it was still more than enough to stand out. Coupled with the obvious power level of the pair of strangers and all the changes made to the city, the residents of Bunga had questions that needed answers. Sir, might I ask, do you know what is happening in the city? So many new buildings went up now. There are fountains and fresh clean water and new guards scaring the children. An old dragonkin woman pleaded. It's not that scary. The guards are just there to keep everyone safe. They will help stop thefts, catch criminals, and stop unwanted violence. Carl offered. Who would want violence? No, you mean fights between demons and orcs, right? Those are against clan rules. The old woman replied. Carl nodded. But the guards will only stop them if they are going to break something. They are a relic of the last system resurgence brought back to enforce city rules. The ancient city lord has returned, and he is starting to bring all the functions of the city back online. The old woman smiled. So the system is real? Dana smiled and patted the woman on the shoulder. Indeed it is. Soon the young ones will start awakening system classes, and the city will return to the state it was in during its peak. What is it you're doing now? Your friend is doing something to the fountain, but we already checked it's clean water. The old woman asked Dana as Carl got to work. He's got a rare skill. He's going to create a healing effect around the fountain, so that everyone who comes to get water is also healed of injuries and illnesses. If everyone comes by every few days, their health will constantly get better. Once he finishes this one, we will go to the other ones in the city. Dana explained. The old dragonkin woman seemed completely unconvinced by Dana's words until the first pulse of the spell covered the area, and she gasped, then shifted her weight and shook her leg. The knee pain faded. It's really gone, she mumbled. See, just keep standing here. The pulses are some time apart, but just standing near the fountain for a while should have you feeling better in no time. Now it's time for us to head out and do the other fountains so that everyone can get the benefit. Dana informed her with a wave before rejoining Carl to walk through the stunned crowd of onlookers. Chapter 1179, Healing Waters. The last of the fountains for them to upgrade was the one at the newly rebuilt City Hall, where a large crowd had gathered. Whether they were waiting for news or just enjoying the water park in the gardens was anyone's guess, but nobody tried to stop Carl as he went for the main fountain to start the upgrades. There were thousands of people gathered in the park, and the first pulse of the spell was a visible change rippling through the crowd. Good work. But if that fountain didn't circulate and filter the water, it would have been absolutely disgusting by now. Dana chuckled as Carl came down from the fountain, as he had been riding near the top where it wouldn't be easily reached. Well, now there is no real excuse for the city's residents not to be clean. I am sure that Orthos will institute public baths soon enough. They used to be a thing here, but I didn't see any new buildings that might be them. He's got enough to do for one day, though. Carl agreed. I can still hear him and the clan chief arguing in the office upstairs. Why don't we head to the guild house for the night, and then we can talk to him in the morning when he's gotten things sorted out here? Dana suggested. Carl wrapped an arm around her shoulders and was about to lead her back when the dragon in question and the clan chief came out to the podium on the front steps of City Hall. Come up to the stage so we can tell everyone at once what is going on. Orthos messaged them both. Reluctantly, Carl and Dana joined the two city leaders on the stage while the clan chief poked at the microphone trying to figure out what it was and what it did. Orthos smiled and activated the device with a bit of mana, then motioned for the chief to speak. My beloved family of the Bunga clan. The chief paused as his magically enhanced voice boomed over the concourse. Today is a glorious day for the Bunga clan. Our city lord has returned and the ancient ways have begun to restore themselves with his help. You must have all seen the fresh water in the fountains or felt the healing. These will remain as long as our city lord remains in Bunga. The new guards are here to help bring the Bunga clan back to its glory days. They will not harm anyone but criminals. I have spoken with the city lord, and none of the Bunga clan's rules go against the ancient laws. He paused as the crowd cheered and then raised his hand for silence. That said, there will be a few changes. The old laws only allow indentured servitude for debts. So our lowest-ranked clan members will have their status adjusted. Functionally, little will change. But they will be free to work for any member of the clan. There were some cheers and a few roars of outrage at that news, but the clan chief wasn't finished. Only by following the old laws can we bring back the system. The city lord has proven this to me and granted me the power to cleave apart our enemies, which has awakened the system in Bunga clan's territory. I can see it, use it, and learn the powers of a true warrior. The clan chief finished. The crowd hooped and cheered in satisfaction while Carl and Dana did their best not to laugh at the fact that Orthos had finally made the clan chief agree by giving him the most basic of basic warrior class skill books. The clan chief stepped back and Orthos took his place at the podium. Greetings, everyone. I am City Lord Orthos, returned now that the city stones are back online. I know that this will be a big change for everyone, but I can assure you that it is all for the betterment of the Bunga clan. There have been a few new buildings constructed already, including the fountain network, which I see many are enjoying. But there will be more of them added soon. Public baths, upgraded smokehouses, and storage buildings to keep food fresh longer. Also, there will be upgrades to the city's defenses, so that the Bunga clan will not need to fear invasion even by feral dragons. Orthos explained. That was the sort of news that generations of the local residents had been waiting to hear. Safety within the city was never guaranteed, but if they could eliminate the threat of invasion and just keep it to local crime, then the lowest-ranking clan members saw a real chance to maybe earn enough to upgrade their living conditions. Of course, they had no idea that Orthos was planning that already, as he was deeply disgusted by the decay in his city's infrastructure. But for the moment his words were a shining beacon of hope. Orthos smiled at the cheering crowd as he continued. These two fine visitors, members of my guild, have placed healing magic on all of the fountains in town, including the water park at the fountain here at City Hall. If a member of your family falls ill or is injured, the first place you should take them is to one of the fountains. Half an hour there will cure most illnesses and injuries. If they have broken bones, set them straight first so they don't heal improperly. The hope is that we can lessen the burden on the midwives and healers in the city and prevent the spread of plagues through the clan. Orthos stepped back while Carl and Dana waved at the crowd and the orcs began setting up grills. It wasn't a proper party without something on the grill. Carl patted the clan chief on the shoulder. Good work. It looks like your people are going to adjust quickly to the changes City Lord Orthos needs to make to bring Bunga back up to his standards. The clan chief grumbled in annoyance, then nodded. Yes, it is all good news. Just hard to accept that things can change so quickly and easily when I couldn't make any of those changes myself. So that's what the problem was. Chapter 1180. Bunga Party. Now that there was a properly Orcish party going on in the City Hall Gardens, Carl knew that they weren't going to get back to the guild house to sleep anytime soon, so he led Dana over to where a group of demon women were setting up drums and cleaning wooden flutes. Oh, welcome. I don't know what to call you, and it seems rude to call you by name. The demoness closest to them giggled. You can use our names, we don't mind. Or pick a title you like. We've got some time before the food, so we thought that we might dance. I'm eager to find out what Bunga clan's musical taste is like. Carl replied. Dana nodded in agreement. If we stand too far away, it's hard to sort it all out. My ears are sensitive, and there are many people singing and playing. In that case, let's start with some classics for the visitors. The singer declared as the rest of the group finished setting up. The drums started a fast and cheerful beat, then the flutes joined in, and the singer began a wordless animalistic cry that the nearby revelers joined in and then began to bounce and spot. It's a mosh pit, Dana realized with a laugh. She was right, it was not some sort of organized formal dance, it was an ancient dance tune that they had forgotten the words to and now just mimicked with a wordless chanting. So Carl pulled Dana into the crowd to join the dancing, which was spreading further and further from the initial group as more musicians joined in on the song. Then a deep roaring voice joined in, and Carl realized that the reason nobody remembered the words was because the song was originally in Dragon and nobody here spoke the language, they just liked the song. Orthos had transformed, and he was singing along with the music, which turned out to be a children's tune about flying, and the rhythmic thumping of the drums was intended to teach them the proper beat to flap their wings. Somehow that made it even funnier, and Carl sang along as they danced through the crowd until a great cheer from one side of the park brought the dance to an end. The food was ready, and the people of Bunga were ready to properly welcome their city lord home. Welcome, visitor. Did you have a preference? We've got many meats roasting. The orc slicing up servings of food declared. Something herb-seasoned, I think. Carl decided. Same. Dana agreed. In that case, we have just the right thing for you. It's a river fish that goes well with the dried herbs and fresh lemon. He declared, then handed them each a plate with a small fish and some sort of purple roast potato on it. Cheers. Actually, do you have more grill space? I have a donation that I'm sure the orcs will like. Carl suggested. Hawk nodded in agreement. He had many things that the orcs liked, but he had far too many crocolisks and crabs. Both were excellent. But he may have just possibly went overboard while collecting them. Hawk pointed to an overlord-ranked crocolisk, and Carl prepared to pull it out when the orc nodded. There is a roasting pit just behind me. How big is your donation? The cook replied. I was going to give you a whole crocolisk. I stored it without portioning it, and it's too much. Carl explained. The orc's eyes lit up. I haven't had crocolisk forever. They live to the south in the swamps, but we don't go there often. The Naga tribes are territorial. Carl found an open spot near the roasting pits and dropped the crocolisk on the ground for the cooks to prepare. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. It might take some time to fully roast, but it's a lot of meat. The orcs cheered and pulled him into careful hugs so they didn't spill his plate. You're pretty decent for an outsider. Don't worry, we can slice strips as it cooks, so there will be crocolisk all night long. You're new to Bunga, but this party will probably last for at least 2 days, so just go to wherever you're staying and sleep when you need. The cook explained. An old troll with white hair and wrinkled blue skin laughed. With a new wife, it can be hard to get out of bed, but the party will be here waiting for you until we run out of food and drink. Carl waved goodbye as he followed Dana to the base of a tree to sit and eat out of the way of the dancers. Every so often someone would stagger across the park, either limping or staggering drunk, and splash into the pool by the main fountain. They would stay there for a few minutes letting the healing totem work and then rejoin the party refreshed and good to go. Maybe the healing pools were a bad idea. If they can just heal their sore feet, the demons and orcs will never stop dancing. Dana laughed as she realized what was happening. They said they'd quit when they ran out of food that had been prepared for the party, and the orcs aren't known for being wasteful. I'm sure that it will be fine eventually. Plus look how happy all the kids are with the new water park. Carl joked. The kiddie pool had been repurposed for a preteen wrestling tournament where the orcs and demons could show off for each other. The matches were currently being dominated by a wrath demon girl with oversized leathery wings and alabaster pale skin. Despite being one of the smaller contestants, she had immense physical strength and had managed to body slam an Orcish boy twice her size to eliminate him. The boy didn't look happy about it, but the rest of the contestants were cheering her on as the next little boy came up to challenge her leadership. It reminded Carl of the wrath demons in Drod when he had first brought them the fertility charms. The female of the group were definitely not any physically weaker than their male counterparts. Chapter 1181. Can gargoyles get bored? Late into the night, Carl and Dana returned to the Bunga Guild house where the gargoyles and the bunny maids welcomed them back with enthusiasm. Carl got the impression that they were bored without guests. He wasn't sure if a gargoyle could actually get bored, but he'd never put one anywhere that didn't get frequent traffic. Even the ones in the Alliance house had rapidly spread to the whole house from the basement, and they had Lotus and the Lala bunnies to keep them constant company. Or Thor. They loved to pile on the behemoth when he was relaxing on the sofa. While the gargoyles just seemed like they had been bored, Carl got the impression that the bunnies viewed this level of even temporary isolation as a form of sensory deprivation torture, on the level of locking Lotus in a concrete room with no windows. They even went so far as to put the sheets by the fireplace to warm, so that Carl and Dana didn't get into a cold bed on a cool night. Not that it would have mattered, as both of them were in fully furred forms at the moment. But it was the thought that counted. You're going to need to gather guild members to the guild house, or at least a few clerics or something. The staff is lonely. Carl warned Orthos before taking Dana to bed. Why did you make staff that needs constant companionship? The bronze dragon replied. They're cute. Carl could almost hear the dragon sigh as he received that message, but a few seconds later he responded. I will arrange for a few of the Beast God Temple's faithful to come and repopulate this branch of the Darklight host. The residents of Bunga are not yet suitable. Perhaps in the next generation they will be. But not now. That was good enough for Carl. They had started to bring the system back online on this continent, and that was one step closer to finding out why it wasn't working properly. The theory that it was someone from the immortal realm who didn't know about the system seemed to be the most likely scenario. But until they actually found the source, Carl wouldn't rule anything out. Including that it was the giants starting shit again. They had been a giant pain in his ass all through the early ranks in the Golden Dragon Nation, and he knew that their Titan God clerics had been working since before recorded history to deactivate the system. Or at least keep it for themselves. Logically, it might also be both. An immortal rank giant. That wasn't something that Carl could deal with, even with the multitude of tricks that he had at his disposal. But if an immortal giant did try to enter this world, it would alert Matilda immediately, and she could take care of it. That brought up another thought. Had the old Chaos Dragon sent them here as bait? If they were bait, there was a greater than zero chance that Kara would get to punch someone in the face, and that was more than enough reason for the Badger and Dragon to coordinate to arrange the whole trip. Kara was conveniently napping, so he couldn't get her reaction to that thought, but Hawk wouldn't put it past them. Tion was sure that his sister wouldn't lie to them. But if you never asked, did it really count as lying? Kara would be happy to tell them if being bait to pick a fight was her plan from the start. You just needed to ask her. Carl wrapped his arms around Dana and settled in for the night with troubled thoughts on his mind. Unfortunately, they weren't gone when he woke up to the mental equivalent of a poke to the face from Orthos. What is so important that you woke me up? Carl asked. Get ready for battle. There is a hostile clan coming for Bunga. The city belongs to the Darklight host, so it's your job to defend the city too. We've got incoming feral dragons with a dragonkin death cult. Orthos explained. Carl nudged Hawk and Kara awake, then gave Dana a gentle shake. Dana? There is an attack on the city. We need to keep them from destroying everything that Orthos just built. Carl whispered. She was in fox form, she would hear him. It took a second to get moving, but then Carl scanned the horizon outside the window and saw the incoming hostile tribe, which was already attacking the farmers outside of town as the non-combatants ran for safety in the city walls. What's the plan? Dana asked. I will transform. You ride on my back. Hawk and Kara will work together while Tion and Opal will provide support for the ground troops from inside their spaces. Neither of them likes to come out during battle. Carl explained. Then he jumped out the window and activated Avatar, along with a full set of buffs over the group. Orthos joined them in the sky as Hawk appeared in the air by Carl's side with Kara riding on his back. The bird immediately gained altitude, racing upward like a shooting star in reverse. That Hawk of yours is insanely fast. Orthos commended. He shouldn't have too many troubles dealing with rogue dragons. I hope. What do we have? Have you gotten a report yet? Carl asked. One rogue sand dragon matriarch and her clutch. I'm afraid that we will have to let you deal with the matriarch today. She's near the peak of totem rank, so you've got the best chance of settling her aggression before the city is damaged. You don't need to kill her if she wants to run away. Once the cult is gone and the spell they've cast over the dragons fades, their aggression will fade as well. Well, that was interesting. Perhaps the dragons weren't all going feral on their own. If there were dragonkin cults casting spells to make them more aggressive, the problem might be more easily solved than expected. After all, they had a Kara. Chapter 1182. Sand Dragons. With Dana settled in on his back and held in place by eternal lightning, Carl flew out to intercept the matriarch while Orthos went to join Bunga's ground troops and Hawk vanished into the clouds. Don't you think that you've gotten too much altitude? Carl asked as the bird vanished from sight. We have a plan. Hawk assured him. As long as he wasn't distracted, it should be fine. The matriarch roared when she saw Carl's massive form, large, even for a mythic rank dragon thanks to his buffs. That was a threat that she couldn't ignore, and when Carl moved the fight away from the infantry, the matriarch followed. Even if they were thousands of meters in the air, the aftermath of their battle was likely to cause wide-scale destruction. It was simply inevitable during a battle between totem-rank dragons. Drop me off here, I will ride with Orthos to deal with the ground forces. I want to know what epic golems do, and I won't be able to use them from 2 kilometers in the air. Dana instructed. Carl chuckled. Go ahead, I will inform Orthos that you intend to ride him into battle. Kara laughed in Carl's mind. Yes, let the Dana mage ride the stuffy dragon. It would do him good. Dana flew down to where Orthos had circled back to collect her, as her own flight was not fast enough to get her to the battle on time. I will not forget this. I am not a horse. Or a sarrow. Orthos warned Carl. I can have her make an oversized lance if it helps. The old cleric gave Carl a slight draconic smile. The children of the city would tell stories of this battle for a century if she did. But it was purely excessive to use a lance when you were riding a dragon. Carl and the matriarch circled each other as they ascended, looking for an opening in their enemy's guard. The sand dragon had a barrier of swirling sand around her body that should equal eternal lightning in effectiveness. Or something close to it. That would not make this an easy fight for either side. Sand vortexes appeared in the air all over their portion of the battlefield, and Carl countered with dozens of hellstorm vortexes. The combination turned the battlefield into an obstacle course, where both had to weave around the swirling winds to avoid having their wings shredded. It was standard for dragons at their level, Orthos knew. But he didn't have an opportunity to warn Carl about the most common battle tactics the matriarch would likely employ. Carl sent out a barrage of disintegration attacks, which the sand dragon countered with fireballs, causing explosions of black fire to pepper the sky like anti-aircraft flak. The 2 dragons crashed together, snapping and snarling as they clawed at each other before twisting free to make another pass. Neither barrier fell in the first exchange, but Carl knew that his strength was buffed to a level much higher than what the sand dragon could claim. It was unlikely to go for another direct confrontation now that it knew it was physically outmatched. But the real battle was not between the 2 champions. From 10,000 meters in the air, Hawk and Kara put their plan into action. Hawk twisted and flapped once hard. He rocketed toward the ground at nearly 600 kilometers an hour, and then at 3,000 meters out, he flared his wings and activated Lord of Destruction, turning himself incorporeal. While Hawk rapidly decelerated, Kara did not. A small black and white fur missile hurtled toward the back of an overlord-ranked sand dragon, who hadn't even noticed the incoming threat. With disintegration, as a protective shell outside of eternal lightning, she prepared a void blast in front of herself. Kara hit the dragon's back like a 30-kilo cannonball, and then void blast exploded on contact, evaporating a large portion of the beast's body and letting Kara hurtle past him toward the ground without slowing. Badger incoming! She cheered as she realized that she was headed for a totem-ranked dragonkin warrior. The wind was knocked from her as she slammed into the man's hastily raised shield, but the satisfying sound of shattered bones let her know that her disintegration barrier hadn't been wasted. The dragonkin cult members began to panic as a blur of teeth and claws tore apart one of their champions, then launched itself at the unfortunate black dragon cleric who happened to be closest to the dead warrior. Satisfying. Hawk laughed as he rained ghostfire meteors on the battlefield. From Orthos back, Dana shook her head at the duo's antics. She hadn't expected any less from them when Hawk had vanished into the clouds. The sand dragons had scattered to avoid the meteor bombardment, and Orthos was about to chase them with Dana on his back. Just let Hawk and Kara deal with the dragons. They're both faster flyers than we are, she suggested. Orthos nodded and landed at the edge of the battlefield to let Dana disembark and join the ground fight. After millennia of training magical beasts, Orthos was an exceptional ground combatant. Most species couldn't fly, and part of his job as an elder of the Beast God Temple was to teach them to fight. They might not be dragons, but 4-legged combat was similar for most species. Dana focused on Epic Golem, then frowned when she got a system menu and not a guardian. Please select form before each activation: Ogre King, Naga Shaman, Earth Elemental Champion. Each listing was a dungeon boss that she had faced in the past. In this case, she went with the Earth Elemental Champion, a 10-meter-tall Titan-sized beast with incredibly high durability and damage reduction. But more importantly, it could reshape its stone club into a massive stone blade, which gave it access to auto parry. Or they could reshape their weapons as Golem Duplication. Gave her 2 of them. She might have just found a new favorite spell. Chapter 1183. They've got your back. The rest of the golems joined the pair of epic golems, while the epic guard remained back to protect Dana from anything that might make it close enough to threaten her from behind. 4 golems and a pair of Earth Elemental Champions at the Overlord rank would make her a priority target among the Bunga Defense Force very quickly, assuming that the enemy understood what was happening. Fortunately, she had the orcs on her side, and even without a system interface, they hadn't had any problems reaching higher ranks through pure dedication. They were happy to have a proper fight, but it was even better when they got comedy with it. The Earth Elemental champions weren't actually very agile, so auto-parry was only minimally effective. But one of them had just parried a fireball from a flying dragon, making it explode in the air overhead. That made the big guys a whole city worth of new friends in one fight. If Ray was here, she could create a whole army of undead, but Dana was satisfied with the force that she had managed to create. The golems served as the vanguard of the Bunga City counterattack, driving deep into the enemy lines and allowing the defenders to push in behind them and get at the juicy meat. Also known as the clerics and shamans that the enemy had tried to protect in the middle of their formation. Hawk was fully engaged in a dogfight with a pair of sand dragons, but Dana couldn't see Kara. She didn't realize that the Chaos Badger had never left the ground again after she had landed, or that she was most of the reason that the golems were able to advance so quickly. Kara was in heaven today. None of the armor on the Dragonkin soldiers was bonded. That meant that it was all up for grabs. She just had to remove the armor from the enemy before someone wrecked it. Or remove the enemy from inside the armor with disintegrate. That worked too. The sight of Kara's looting methods had absolutely terrified the enemy army, and it was already clear that the ones closest to Kara desperately wanted to retreat, but the forces behind them hadn't realized the problem yet, and they were trapped. Worse, they couldn't even attack her properly because she kept retreating between the golem's feet, so that the constructs would parry the attacks intended for her. The Dragonkin weren't sure if it was possible for a badger to smirk, but they were pretty sure that they had just seen it. Carl and the Sand Dragon exchanged spells and dodged vortexes in a complex aerial dance, each trying to get the upper hand but both wary of what the other might be holding in reserve. Then the matriarch suddenly broke off and abandoned the cause, taking her surviving whelps with her. By the time that Carl realized she wasn't just circling for another attack, she was far off in the distance to the east, and Hawk was asking whether he should follow them. Let them go. I don't think that they'll be in any hurry to come back to Bunga. Help with the ground assault so that the city doesn't lose too many warriors. Carl instructed. That didn't look like it was going to be a huge issue, as the Bunga City residents outnumbered the attackers by quite a large margin. Without their dragons, the cult didn't stand a chance. Hey boss, did you know these guys aren't local? They don't smell like this continent. Kara welcomed Carl as he landed at the edge of the battle. The Chaos Badger had created a mound of corpses and was currently using it to play a macabre game of King of the Hill so she could look down at her enemies. Sister Ray taught her the technique, and it really was fun. The remaining members of the cult did not show any signs of retreating. No signs of fear at all. No, that wasn't right, Kara decided. They were terrified. But more terrified of what would happen to them if they retreated, so they would fight to the very end and consider dying a victory of its own. That meant she didn't have to worry about being nice to them. Then Kara remembered that she had forgotten an entire step in her plan. Elemental's Wrath. The sight of the suddenly enlarged and flaming Chaos Badger was the breaking point even for the heavily brainwashed cultists. They broke and began to flee, but in her transformed state Kara was much faster than they were, and everything that she touched erupted with elemental flames. But the enemy cultists weren't the only ones terrified. None of the Bunga City defenders dared to come within 20 meters of Kara, so that they weren't mistaken for a cultist and attacked by that blur of fur and flames. Especially the Bunga City Dragonkin. Carl laughed as the enemy troops began to run right past him to escape from Kara. The Carl isn't even scary enough to stop the stupid ones from fleeing. Hawk laughed. Kara giggled as she gave a Dragonkin an atomic wedgie, then threw him on the pile. She didn't even attack him, just pulled his underwear up over his head and threw him with the corpses. If he knew what was good for him, he would stay there until she was done. The fight was almost over anyhow, with the survivors having fled and the dragons who could actually threaten the city long gone. But it was Kara's assertion that these attackers didn't smell like this continent that stuck in Carl's head. He hadn't been trying to sniff the sand dragon when they were grappling, so he hadn't noticed. But Carl did notice that Kara was still only a little over a meter tall, even when transformed with Elemental's Wrath. That skill should surely cause a more extreme transformation than simply making her into a flaming badger, but with the chaos element on her side, there was nothing saying that the spell couldn't have turned her into a llama or something. Chapter 1184. Follow the Retreat. Kara ended the transformation spell as the last of the enemies left. Berserk was fun. She imagined it was what Sister Ray felt like all the time in combat. But she couldn't be absolutely sure. It definitely made stabbing things feel more satisfying. Orthos transformed back to human as he approached Carl. I think that you and Dana should go follow the retreating attackers. They were not from this place. Everyone born on a world under the influence of the dragon gods has signs of it. They were dragonkin, but not from a world subject to the dragon gods. That most likely means that they're from the immortal realm, but it might be another mortal realm where the old gods are forgotten and there are no chromatic dragons to remind them. He explained. Will you be all right? Carl asked. The bronze dragon smiled. Of course. First I will heal many of the most severely wounded, and then the fountains can take care of the rest. I'm not a high priest of the beast gods for nothing. Dana frowned. I've been meaning to ask. How does that even work? Aren't you a cleric of the bronze dragon god by default? Orthos smiled. I am actually. Think of it as something like dual-classed. You see, I started as a bronze dragon cleric, but when I advanced I was already working with the beast temples to help civilize their orphans. And I chose an advanced class that made me a high priest of the beast gods as well. Like how you have been a few different kinds of mage at this point. Dana nodded in understanding. That makes sense, it just seemed odd that you had entirely changed pantheons. Orthos shrugged. It wasn't so big of a change. There is a beast god of order which is similar to the bronze dragon of law. Both of the gods get along well, and there was no resistance to my old skills when I changed. As he talked, Orthos began casting a ritual magic spell that was spreading healing over the battlefield, patching up the wounded in some sort of triage order, as not everyone within the zone was healing at the same time. That should make it a multiple target healing spell, Carl reasoned. Not an area of effect. But the result should be the same. Well, Miss Dana, should we shadow the retreating enemy? If they return to where they entered the continent or even to an overnight camp, we might be able to learn what Matilda sent us here for. Carl suggested. Dana looked at the horizon where the sun had only just risen. All right, let's go. We can sleep later. She reluctantly agreed. Hawk and Kara returned to their spaces to wait for the next event, but only a few minutes after they took off, Hawk was out again to scout the area. This was a whole new continent with all new mice. Even if he didn't really care where the dragonkin who attacked the new house's city were going, he might still come across something good. While Hawk might not be headed out for the right reasons, Carl knew that the bird would actually do his job and track the retreating enemy troops. I can't see anything from up here but the scenery. It's nice, really. The mountains to the north, the woods beneath us. Dana muttered as they reached the second hour of soaring in the sky, watching the troops scurry away from the battle. I found it. They're coming from a big mouse tunnel that leads underground. Hawk reported. Carl turned to find the spot that Hawk was talking about and realized that there was an entire village set up there. They had a dragon breeding facility set up with hatchling feral dragons being trained as mounts, chain dragons of the lesser species locked in pens and clutches of eggs under warm lights. They didn't let the dragons guard their eggs, probably to reduce how protective they were of their pens. But that meant that this was more than just a simple cult invasion from another world. They were established and they were intending to stay here for a long time. In fact, they might be behind many of the reports of feral juvenile dragons that Matilda had mentioned. The real problem was that they had dozens of totem-ranked dragons and dragonkin mages in the camp, and neither Carl nor Dana could transform into a dragonkin to try to infiltrate them. Hey, little help? Just melt these chains and we can all be free. The dragons on the ground were shouting as they saw Carl flying overhead. It's a trap, they're under a mind control barrier. Kara noted. Don't get close. They've stolen my first clutch. A mental voice informed Carl in Draconic. The pure agony of the young dragon's voice was all it took for Carl to make the decision. Hey Kara, wanna play with some dragonkin? You can have everything but the eggs. We'll put those in the tiny world because they'll bond if you bring them in your space. Carl suggested. Tion scoffed as he examined the situation. I can break those chains. They're just overlord-ranked alloy enchanted to bind dragons. I'm the furthest thing from dragons, and even from here I can shatter the shackles with earth manipulation. Wait until we're close. Hawk, you get the honor of the first pass. Blow ghostfire into the tunnels and see what pops out of the escape hatches. I will be right behind you to join the attack when Tion pops the shackles. Kara, you find the mages keeping that mind control barrier up. Dana, we're going to attack the camp and jailbreak the dragons. Hold on tight. Carl instructed aloud so she could prepare for the dive. Hawk was a streak of fire as he dove, but he didn't just flame the tunnels, he cast Apocalypse over the dragonkin camp on the surface before sending a stream of flame down the access tunnel to the underground. There was momentary panic, but Carl was approaching and the mages were shouting for the capture teams to be prepared. Kara laughed as they made it super easy for her to find out who she had to deal with first. It was like a 2-for-1 bonus day. Chapter 1185. Dragons Freed. Dana bombarded the ground with spells, then summoned her golems as Carl approached the ground, giving them someone to fight before Kara arrived. Carl added his, including a full team of spectral knights, adding to the attack force. Then Tion destroyed all the shackles on the dragons at the same time that Kara stole the barrier orb. Not destroyed. She killed the man holding it and then tossed it in her space to inspect later. The barrier over the dragon pens collapsed, and the captured dragons cheered in victory, before either attacking their captors or grabbing handfuls of eggs from various clutches and flying away. Thank you, World Dragon. Good luck. The female voice who had warned Carl declared, this time in his ears, not in his mind. It was a young ice dragon, her scales nearly transparent over blue hide, giving her the appearance of thick ice like what was found in the Frost Giant Nation. Then there was Kara everywhere. Lesser Kara, Greater Kara, Epic Kara. The Chaos Badger cheered. Did she just turn herself into golems? Dana laughed as the whole group exploded with flames. Kara had activated Elemental's Wrath, and the golems gained the skill as well. Carl bit the head off a dragonkin mage, then shook his head. I don't think that they're actual golems. They're illusions. She's mimicking the golem spell with clones made of pure chaos energy then transformed into elementals. In her space, Opal nodded in agreement. This was a form of minor illusion. If someone damaged them, they would vanish. The problem was damaging them when they were berserk and had limited invulnerability based on Kara's durability. The Badgers were relentless, tearing through the camp with one destination in mind. The tunnels. Where did you hide the good loot? In your room, of course. There was nothing good in the camp, just a bunch of leftovers that the dragons didn't leave with. So the good stuff had to be underground, and she was going to find it. The real Kara was intently hunting down all the mages who were trying to influence the dragon's minds, killing and looting all the mind control and dragon imprisonment devices that they kept trying to use on Carl, not understanding that he wasn't really a dragon. It must be the dragon rider. Aim for the rider and we should be able to recapture the product. One of the dragonkin shouted. Carl smashed him under one massive foot and Kara used pilfer to see what he was hiding. She got a single golden key, which wasn't too interesting. But keys led to things that were interesting. The man didn't even realize that he had been robbed before Carl activated Void Blast around his foot and obliterated the leader's body. Soon there were no other dragons in the fight. They were either dead or they had fled after the enemies on the surface were all gone. The reinforcements that the dragonkin had been counting on had never arrived, as Hawk was a master at grabbing little rodents who popped their heads out of tunnels. He had flooded every entrance that he could find with Ghostfire except the one that the Kara clones had entered. Boss, we found good stuff. Well, good stuff that you can have. There is a portal stone and it's got an open portal. Kara updated. Where does it lead? Dunno. Some other world. Not powerful, weaker than the mana here. I sent a few Karas through and they didn't find anything good. It's just a basement with nothing but a portal and no doors. The mages must enter with magic then. Tell them to grab the portal stones from both sides and bring them here. I'm not going to transform and clear the tunnels, we will let the golems do it. Carl explained. Got it. Portal stones incoming. The stones were made of polished obsidian and carved with active runes. Whoever had made these knew the art of runecrafting. But they were set to randomize the destination every time that the spell was activated. So even if the same spell was used again, it was unlikely that they would end up on this world. I don't see any more survivors with soul sight. Hawk informed them. Alright, the golems will try to flush some more from underground. I don't know if there will be any, but we shouldn't leave any of them to try to open a new portal home. Carl agreed. Kara hummed happily as she began to pile eggs into the tiny world. Nobody had claimed these ones, so they were definitely lootable even if they didn't go in the loot pile. The caretakers in the tiny world were thoroughly baffled by the sudden appearance of hundreds of dragon eggs scattered over every part of the tiny world, but the forest dragon was overjoyed when she found some from her own species carefully tucked into the branches of the largest trees in the forest zone. Dana, can you go update the caretakers about the dragon eggs? Kara doesn't speak common. Carl requested. What caretakers? Dana asked. Right. Forgot to mention them. There is a whole group of nature priestesses and druids living in the tiny world taking care of the plants for Remy's alchemy and the tiny world itself. Kara moved all the dragon eggs into the various environments there for safekeeping. They're bound to be confused and I didn't want to drop you in the dirt when I moved. Carl explained. He opened the portal and Dana stepped through to find herself face to face with a tiny cleric with branches in her hair and tears in her eyes. Did you send me siblings? Thank you so much, pretty lady. You must be the Dana mage. Boss Carl told us all about you. Do you know how many of them there are? We're finding dragon eggs everywhere. The tiny woman rambled. Yes, I am Dana. We raided a camp that had imprisoned dragons for breeding purposes. These are the eggs that none of the survivors claimed. I don't know how many of them there are, the Chaos Badger placed them all. But might I ask who you are? Dana replied. Oh, you can call me Button. I'm a forest dragon nature priestess. That part was self-explanatory. The introduction alone was enough to tell Dana that this was a nature priestess. But a forest dragon? When did they get a forest dragon? And she was very close to the totem rank. The branches were also part of her hair. Chapter 1186. Dragon Eggs and Loot. Chapter 1186. Dragon Eggs and Loot. Dana was about to brush them out when she noticed that the branches were attached to her head and that the leaves fluttered when she was excited. I don't know if the eggs are all in places that will help them hatch. I will have to ask Carl later. But he wanted me to let you know that there were dragon eggs coming. Dana informed her. Got it. The others are all off on a treasure hunt for dragon eggs now. We will have to send someone underground to find them. And maybe to the library? Do you know what dragons they came from? Button asked. None are chromatic dragons, and they're all near the camps in the various biomes, except for the ones in the mountain city which are in the park on a pile of gems. Carl informed Dana with a system message. Dana hugged the tiny dragon. They're all near the camps, but there are some in the underground city. I'm sure you know where that is by now. Dana didn't. She hadn't been here since it was renovated and the tiny world was much larger than she remembered. How many of you are there? She asked as she followed the little dragon. About 100 in total. Not all dragons. Mostly beastkin with some elves and such. My sister is around here somewhere. Likely in the swamp. She likes the humidity, Button explained. She had led Dana to the shore of the lake near a campsite which had a pair of elves and a dragonkin woman fussing over a pile of mottled blue eggs. Oh, you wanted to examine the eggs? Dana realized. Button looked confused. No, they'll take care of it. Let's go swimming. I made the cutest swimming suit the other day. Do you have one with you? If not, it's all girls here, no need to be shy about skinny dipping. Nobody else ever wears swimsuits no matter how cute they are, she explained. Dana sighed. Perhaps a sense of urgency simply wasn't part of the mental programming of nature priestesses. This one seemed even less concerned about timelines than Lotus. Carl, I'm going for a swim with Button. Then I will meet with the rest of the caretakers. Do you have everything handled there? She asked. Yeah, we're good. They've cleared the underground. It was just an old den they expanded. Only a few side tunnels and they're all empty now. Enjoy your swim. I will come join you tonight if you're not busy. Dana laughed. If the others were just as flaky as Lotus and Button, she would likely be in the middle of a cuddle pile with snacks by dark. All right, we've got the rest of the day to play, Dana informed the young dragon. Winning. The others always want to do chores and responsible stuff. While Dana and Button played in the lake, Carl spent a few minutes focusing on the effect that was suppressing the use of magic on this continent. The effect was subtle if you could already use magic, but it would effectively limit the growth of anyone here. Only a few minutes of focus gave him a general direction, and Carl spread the wings of his dragon form to head toward the strongest point. It would be hard to tell how far he had to go until he was there, as he didn't know how strong the effect should be at its core. But the further he flew, the more obvious it was that heading northeast toward Glatt was the right choice. Then Carl got a brilliant idea. He had been to Glatt before, though it had objectively been a very long time. But that didn't mean he couldn't open a portal there now. He still had a good enough sense of spatial awareness for that. A thought was enough to open the portal 1,000 meters above the trees of the elven village of Glatt, but it was nothing like what Carl remembered. The massive trees were gone, the elven city made of tree forts and suspended bridges was no more. Instead, it was a mangled battlefield slowly regrowing around the shattered stumps of the formerly mighty forest. There were still thousands of elves present, huddled in tents and looking dejected. Not so much a village anymore, but a refugee camp. Carl landed at the edge of the camp and noticed that not one of the people got up to defend against or greet him. They just sat there awaiting their fate. This time he returned to his natural form, the version of him that they would have seen the first time. Just in case one of the long-lived species remembered him. Carl didn't actually know how long elves lived, but there was a forest dragon here before and she might remember him. Is this Glatt? Carl asked an elderly woman as he reached the camp. Glatt? Glatt hasn't existed for 100 years. But yes, I suppose that you should be close to where it once was. The elderly elf agreed. Can you tell me what happened to it? Or were you not from the area? Carl tried. The old woman sighed and gestured for him to sit. Carl took out a bag of trail mix from Thor's space, as the elves were vegan and most of the baked goods he had contained either eggs or milk. Usually both plus sugar, as Lotus made them. The other elves cast longing glances at the small bag of food, and Carl realized that things were worse here than they had looked. Kara gave him a mental nudge. There are bags of rice and beans in Thor's space. Tessa makes them in advance and he holds on to them for her. Not just a few bags either. There were literal tons of rice and beans stored in Thor's space for some emergency that may or may not ever happen. Carl took out 2 30-kilo sacks of the ubiquitous cleric food and nodded for the refugees to come get them. He could help at least this much. Chapter 1187. Send them to her. Chapter 1187. Send them to her. Do you have cooking utensils? If not, I can make some for you, Carl offered. The elves looked around the camp, then frowned. None big enough to cook for everyone. Carl smiled and let Tion use earth manipulation to make a pair of giant metal pots. Those should be suitable. Here, take this ring as well, it makes water. You can use mana, right? The old man who had come to get the bags winked at Carl. We might be in bad shape, but we're still elves. I can use enough magic to make water to boil rice. But the giants killed all our actual mages and clerics, so we don't have anyone who can make food. With the forest destroyed, it's been hard to find anything at all. The old woman sighed and nodded. Just over 1,000 years ago, the Titan gods declared a holy war on the continent. With their immortal lords suppressing the mana on the planet, we couldn't even fight back. They started in the middle of the continent somewhere near Sallow Lake. That wasn't giant territory before the war, I don't know where they came from. But as the war started, it became harder for our mages to use grand magics every day. It took them 100 years to make their way across the continent, and the old civilizations collapsed under their relentless assaults. Then they retreated to the lake and made the center of the continent into their new nation. But they still send armies around the continent looking for anyone trying to repair what they broke. They steal people sometimes, but I'm told that there are no slaves in the giant cities, so they're probably eating them. Savages they are. But what brings you here? Carl patted her on the shoulder. Supreme Lady Matilda, the Chaos Dragon Elder of the Darklight Host, asked me to come here and find out what was messing with the continent's access to the system. We have found that it's mostly just magic that is restricted, as we managed to restore system access to a few warriors. Once I find the source of the problem, I will either fix it or call the Supreme Lady to deal with it for me. The ancient chaos troubled herself over us? A middle-aged elf asked. Carl nodded. She is awake again, and your situation intrigued her because it's not right. Anything not right and not influenced by chaos is new and interesting to her. So she sent me to go deal with it while she takes care of her usual tasks in the Dragon Isles. The elderly elf sitting next to Carl smiled. Is she actually doing something? Carl patted her on the shoulder. It doesn't look like it, but she prevents all the attempts by the immortal realm to enter this world and claim the people as slaves. I suspect that the Titans came from another mortal realm world, and that's why she didn't catch it before there were too many of them here for the people to handle. 1,000 years ago, she was mostly sleeping through the downturn in the world's magic, not paying close attention to everything that happened around the world. The elf got a nostalgic look on her face. I don't suppose that you could send us to her? The Chaos Dragon has always been a friend of the elves in our times of need, she asked. Carl smiled. I don't see why not. Join the others and have dinner, and then I will send you all to her hometown, so you can go petition to speak to her directly. Do Chaos Dragons eat elves? Hawk asked, confused about what she would want with a bunch of people with no power. No, but they live for a very long time, so she can talk to them long enough for them to start understanding things. Kara explained. Hawk stopped caring about the conversation at that point. He had known Thor almost all his life, and he still didn't understand him any better. It must be a chaos thing that he didn't have an affinity for. Kara thought about pointing out that Hawk struggled to even remember important people's names, but that just felt mean. Unlike all of the others, the windspeed hawk species was not known for its keen intellect. It was an absolutely lethal hunting bird at the common rank, but even the lightning sparrow were known to be much more clever and able to employ complex defensive tactics to ward off predators. Even after all this evolution, Hawk's thought process was still somewhat simple. Far beyond what anyone would expect, but very single-minded and focused, not horribly innovative except when it came to fire magic. Perhaps learning mystic cooking would be good for him, as it encouraged developing new mixtures of ingredients to improve food. The elves used their innate nature magic to help cook the food faster and probably improve the taste with limited ingredients, which had them all eating less than 30 minutes later. Carl got the impression that they were actually rushing through the meal on the hope that they could finish before he changed his mind and didn't bring them back to Saihosesa. But he could use portals, and it wasn't a big deal to just send them directly to Matilda. Once they were finished, the elves packed up their camp, which looked like they had practiced the process dozens of times before. They had clearly been here for some time, but within 10 minutes everything was loaded into packs or onto narrow wagons and ready to move on. All right, I will put you near the Supreme Lady. She's a guild member of mine, so I can target her, but I'm not sure where she's standing. Actually, that's probably not a great idea. I haven't been to Saihosesa to drop you there directly, but I can bring you to Drod on the Dragon Isles and have one of our members forward you from there. Carl explained. Sending them directly to the Supreme Lady had sounded easy in theory. But once it had occurred to him that she might not be at home and he might dump the elves on the wrong continent or even in the Chaos Plane, the idea seemed much less appealing. He should probably go visit her in person in case this happened again. Chapter 1188, Resistance to Magic. Carl began to cast the portal spell to Drod and was immediately hit with the most intense resistance to magic use that he had ever felt. Kara, a little assistance. The Chaos Badger brought up a nullify bubble around him, suppressing the effect. That let the portal form smoothly just outside the main gates to Drod. Carl waved to the city guards and then tossed them a couple of gold coins. Can you lead these fine guests to the house? I will ask someone to get in contact with the Supreme Lady as they are requesting a direct meeting. Carl explained. Of course, sir. Ladies, gentlemen. This way, please. We will get you settled in the crafting village for now, as it has lodging for everyone. Carl will have someone here to assist you in just a few minutes. The guard agreed. From outside of Carl's line of sight, a matronly voice replied. No need. I will see them in. Where did you say that they needed to be? Oh, Librarian Sapphire. Yes, that is perfect. Carl is on the other side of the portal, and he says they need to speak directly to the Supreme Lady. The guard replied, sounding incredibly relieved that he didn't need to be the one to tell someone to bring the Chaos Dragon over. Sapphire, before I run away again, how is the project coming? Carl called. Very well. We've got the inscriptionists from the library here, and they're working overtime on the skills needed for advanced warriors, clerics, and mages. Mage is still a bit spotty as not every mage is compatible with the advanced spells we have found. But there are also more advanced mage class residents compared to advanced warriors, so they're not our biggest concern. She replied, then frowned. How long will you be gone? We could use your expertise here as well. Carl smiled, though he knew she couldn't see him. Only a few weeks. Once we finish up here, we will be back for the wedding, and then I can help with the projects more frequently. The portal closed immediately after the last of the elves were through, and Sapphire shrugged. Carl must be busy with whatever he was doing there. But on the Nia continent, Carl found himself surrounded by dozens of dragonkin warriors with furious expressions. We finally found you. Return the portal stones and we might let you have a quick death. The leader of the group demanded. Carl laughed. It won't do you any good. I destroyed the stones on the other side. You're never going home. The dragonkin was about to retort when more portals opened and 5 totem-rank giants with 4 arms and massive bodies walked through. Well, look what we have here. The boss doesn't mind if you don't like each other, you all end up in the same spot anyhow. The giant with the darkest complexion announced, then chuckled grimly. The dragonkin turned to face the giants while Carl tapped his chin, considering his next move. Before we start the fun part of this, I have a question. Which group is the one suppressing magic on the continent? It's like wearing underwear a size too tight. Very uncomfortable. Carl joked. The dragonkin looked confused, but the giants sneered. Did you think that we would just let the lesser beings use their silly tricks on us? We aren't like you pathetic short-lived species. We remember. The giant retorted. So it's the followers of the Titan gods. That makes things a bit easier. That still left the question of what the dragonkin that the giants had called the dragon hunters were doing here and how long they had been operating on the continent. There might have been more slipping through Matilda's protective net than the Chaos Dragon was aware of. Or they might all be from mortal worlds and she simply wasn't concerned about them. More giants came through behind the initial group, but they were all monarchs and overlords, not an immediate concern for Carl. Stay out of our way and we won't attack you, thief. The leader of the dragonkin whispered. Carl nodded. I don't attack those who don't attack me. It was a nice sentiment. A blatant lie, but a nice sentiment. The leader of the giants equipped a 2-handed maul, letting Carl know that they had some equivalent of an inventory or perhaps storage devices. If they weren't from this world, they probably didn't have system classes, and Carl didn't see any other signs that they did. Then the giant slammed the ground and a wave of force raced toward Carl and the dragonkin. A stomp of Carl's foot to activate Gravity Slam caused a collision halfway between them and threw dirt up in the air, shading the battlefield as Hawk appeared high in the sky and Kara snuck out of her space to join the fight. She loved picking on big dumb giants. Carl transformed back into the avatar of the World Dragon and activated all his buffs so he could get the fight really started. The giants began to curse the moment that he transformed, and the totems all abandoned the attack on the dragonkin to target him. Carl called for his golems. First the Epic Guard, then Dire Bears, which duplicated to 4. Then the Epic Golem, which brought up a system message that Carl didn't have time to deal with as he was using Void Blast to parry skills from the giants. Randomize, he thought. Epic Golem selected Myceloid King. 2 towering myceloids appeared in all their fungal glory and immediately rained spores down on the battlefield as skills crashed into their bodies. Kara laughed as she grabbed one of the spores to stuff up a giant's kilt. Damage reduction doesn't stop them from spreading spores. The badger laughed. But you forgot that you've got the More Golem spell from Dana. She added. Right, Greater Golem. Carl called for the last golems, and for totem-ranked Lightning Sarrow appeared looking exactly like Thor had before he evolved into a behemoth. Yes, Brother Thor is back, baby. Kara giggled. That armored head fringe was the perfect spot to hide from retaliation after she stuffed itching spores up the giant's kilts. Carl laughed as a giant roared in frustration at being touched inappropriately by the badger, then summoned the Spectral Knights. The giants wanted a fight. Now they had one. Chapter 1189. Suppressed Battle. Carl frowned as more thoughts filled his mind, strategizing a defensive perimeter around what the greater golems assumed were the weakest members of the group. Kara and the Epic Guard. Damnable World Dragon. He can still use all his magic even under suppression. The leader of the giants snarled as he dodged Carl's attempt to bite his face off. It took many times more mana than it should have, and they weren't even at the center of the effect yet. But yes, Carl could still summon golems well enough. However, if he was going to keep spamming Void Blast, he was going to need to supplement his mana supply even with his prodigious mana reserves. Fortunately, the giants were all warriors, so he didn't have to deal with too many complex spell effects, mostly just direct attacks. The golems were doing an excellent job of holding off the rest of the giants, but the constant stream of thought from the greater golems was surprising. Carl didn't even hear the Myceloid King's thoughts, and he knew that they were intelligent as they were speaking to each other in some language of flashing colors he couldn't decipher. Then it came to him. They were Sarrow. The Sarrowpacks shared a mental connection. It was an innate ability of the species, and Carl had just never noticed because it was also a skill granted by his class. So the golems treated him as part of the pack, and the golems were close enough to real Sero that the mental communication worked. Carl did notice that their refreshing lightning was either missing or superseded by eternal lightning though. He could hear swearing in the distance, but Carl didn't have an opportunity to search for new threats. A crushing blow of the giant's maul narrowly missed as Carl charged, but the giant had 4 arms to grapple with and only 2 holding the maul. The 2 massive forms were deadlocked for a second, then Carl breathed ghostfire in the giant's face, forcing him to retreat. Tricky. Using a spell instead of your real breath weapon. The giant snarled. Carl chuckled. You're surprisingly durable. I thought that you'd be a snack by now. His claws sparked against the head of the maul as the giant parried his next attack. The Titan clan does not go down so easily. We are not the discarded dregs of your world. The giant panted. Carl was proving to be incredibly annoying to fight. Not just because he could still use magic, but because it was nearly impossible to damage him, and when you did he healed so fast you didn't make any headway. The Titan clan healed quickly as well, but against the greater dragon species they couldn't claim absolute superiority on a physical level. Plus those shambling mushroom men were turning everything toxic. The angry noises were getting louder, but Carl still couldn't tell where they were coming from. It wasn't any of the 4-armed giants he was fighting, but it sounded too close to be the other giants who had retreated along with the dragonkin to fight in an area that wasn't covered in spores. Gravity slam on his fist knocked the giant's leader backward, and Carl used the opportunity to assess the battlefield. Over half of the reinforcements were dead, along with almost all of the dragonkin who were trying to flee the battlefield. There were only 2 more of the totem rank giants standing as well, but he could see that 2 of the down giants were only injured and would rejoin the battle in a few minutes if they could escape from Carl long enough to heal. The pain screaming was coming from the other side of the portals as Hawk had cast Apocalypse through them to stop the giants from sending any more forces through. A gurgling moan made Carl instinctively wince in sympathy as one of the fallen giants had his groin crushed by the foot of an overgrown Sero golem. That was enough sign for the survivors that this fight was over. But they couldn't retreat when their village was on fire on the other side. Even if they closed the portals they couldn't safely retreat. It had been the open portal that had drawn them here, so Carl could just open a new portal to their hometown now that he had marked it with a spell. Or with a curious badger, as Kara had gone through to look around but quickly came back when she saw that it was all on fire and nobody wanted to fight. Another of the totem rank giants fell to the combined efforts of the golems and Kara, leaving just one unfortunate fighter plus the leader who was deadlocked with Carl. The leader barked an order and the overlord rank giants at the other side of the battlefield began to retreat, grabbing the bodies of the fallen as they ran for the portals. Good fight. I am sure that I will see you again soon, Carl informed the giant. Don't meddle in things that don't concern you and we won't have to. The giant replied, nearly shattering eternal lightning with a strike to Carl's shoulder. The suppression effect is causing trouble for others. I can't just let it go. Carl replied, speaking quietly enough that only his opponent would hear. The giant retreated a few steps, then grabbed his last standing ally. Good luck with that. If you find it, I'll pay well for it. Then the leader hurled his partner through the portal and exited the battlefield. The portals closed behind them and Kara climbed up one of the greater golems' backs to inspect the battlefield without the effort of actually flying. The dragonkin took one look at Carl's group and simply ran away. There was no point in them trying to get their stolen portal stones back from him. He could fight a totem-ranked Titan champion to a standstill, and even when everything else was dead or dying neither of them had taken any serious damage. That wasn't something that their surviving members could handle. They owed the giants for that one. If they hadn't shown up when they did, the dragonkin would have all died here. Chapter 1190. Source of Suppression. Kara stretched out on the greater golem's back as the summoned Sero pack scoured the area for more threats. Once they were sure that there was nothing else nearby that might be a threat to them, the Sero relaxed and stood around in a circle waiting for Carl to give instructions. Carl wasn't sure what to do with them. It was getting more and more difficult to use magic as he got closer to the source of the anomaly, but traveling on foot across a continent was simply not an option when they had limited time. The next best option would be to move them to the tiny world so that they didn't have to be dismissed. Then they could be brought out as needed, and the only risk factor was that someone might notice the entrance and try to force their way into the tiny world. Carl didn't know how likely that was, as he hadn't met anyone else with a similar skill that was active. So without any evidence that it wasn't relatively safe, that was what Carl went with. He just had to remind the epic guard to warn the others that there were golems coming to visit. I am going to fly closer to the source of the suppression and try to find it. Something that the giants said bothers me though. They wished me good luck and offered to pay well if I did find the source of the suppression. It might not be in this world anymore, simply link to it to keep the effect active. Carl informed Dana, who was still occupied entertaining Button and unaware of what was going on outside. Giants? I hope you're not out there causing trouble already? I'm not even done napping on the beach yet. Carl laughed at her annoyed response. No, just a small group that came when I cast a spell. Don't worry too much about it. I will come to you tonight if there isn't a good spot for us both to sleep out here. Carl began following the path of destruction to the east, the most direct route to the strongest point in the suppression. From his vantage point, it looked like the suppression was still coming from the territories of the giant clans, but if the one he had just fought was to be believed, they had lost whatever had caused the effect. How they had managed that was a mystery. But with the decline in power between system resurgences, when the mana was deeper within the planet, they might have thought that it had done its work and placed it somewhere for safekeeping. Then generations passed and they forgot what it was for. That was usually how lost artifact stories went. You know, this is the same path that we followed to find Kara. Hawk noted. Kara looked around. I remember it looking better than this. I wonder if the orcs are still here. The local tribes were so annoying, always trying to poke me with sticks. They didn't even bring food. This place sucked. The further that Carl flew, the fewer signs of life he found. Not just the sentient species. The ground was dry and barren, and what used to be the grasslands of the Miviaskan Empire were turning into cracked earth flats. But Carl saw rain clouds on the horizon, and there were muddy ponds all over the hillsides. So the problem wasn't the rain. Something else was suppressing growth here. At first it didn't make sense to Carl. But then he began to understand. It wasn't that there was a second negative influence here. It was that the first one was too strong. Whatever was making it difficult to use magic or access, the system had suppressed the mana to such an extreme extent that even the plant life, which normally only needed a bit of vital energy, had begun to die. However, if that were the case, then the lands of the giants still far to the east should be completely uninhabitable. Not even animals would survive if the plant life were gone and the suppression effect got any stronger. It didn't seem like the sort of effect that the giants would have wanted for their empire, assuming that they were going to try to take over the continent and suppress the other races. It did them no good if they couldn't thrive themselves. Carl kept flying east until suddenly he felt the imbalance shift. It was now south of him and beginning to subtly fade as he flew away. The center of the effect was not at Sallow Lake where the giants had made their capital. Instead, it was somewhere in the dead wilderness of what had once been the Miviaskan Empire. Soaring on the updrafts caused by hot sun on baked earth, Carl searched for the source of the anomaly. There, far beneath him, there were kilometers of bleached white bones scattered across bare stone. And right in the middle was a portal. No, a dungeon entrance. Immediately Carl understood what had happened and why nobody had ever found the source of the suppression effect. Someone had taken it into a dungeon, and then died inside. But the effect was too strong, it didn't remain within the dungeon, it leaked out. And with nobody to control it, the effect was running at full output, unrestrained and without any of the usual guidelines that would be used. Like not suppressing mana so much that it killed the plant life. The question was how Carl was going to deal with it. If he just flew down there without a plan, he would surely become part of the bone pile around the dungeon. He was 5,000 meters in the air and he could feel the effect trying to leach the mana from his body. If he was under 2,000 meters, he may not be able to resist as the others had failed to. The bones didn't lie. But even if he could overcome the effect, it was most likely inside the dungeon, and Carl had never heard of anyone entering someone else's dungeon instance. Every group that entered was separated. Chapter 1191. Into the breach. We might have to risk it. I can heal us and use divine power to supplement your life. Tian suggested. Kara nodded. That sounds good. And I will nullify the effects around you as you go down. If it becomes too much, when we get close you can just fly up again. Kara had mythic rank nullify, and that should be close to the peak of what anything in this world should be outputting. If Kara couldn't mitigate the damage, they really might need to call for Matilda's assistance. Alright, let's get this show on the road. Everyone prepare to descend. Carl agreed. Ooh, transform. If you're not fully in the world, it might not affect you as much. Hawk suggested. Lord of Destruction totem rank transformation skill. Ignores most damage types. Incorporeal, deals fire damage to both physical and metaphysical targets. Hawk had a point. The Lord of Destruction ignored most types of damage, so it was a good choice for this mission. Plus, it was effective on both the physical and metaphysical, so there was a chance it would work on whatever mana suppression effect was killing everything else. Carl descended through the clouds and felt the moisture stinging his scales. Hawk. Does your nearly invincible transformation make you vulnerable to even common water? Water magic is evil. Carl shook his head. He probably should have expected that water was anathema to all that was Hawk. So he put up eternal lightning to protect himself from the water. It didn't take any damage, so very little mana was needed to keep it active, and Carl's smooth glide down was no longer met with any resistance. I can feel the spell struggling with nullify. We're good. Kara announced as they reached 1,000 meters in the air. Then at 500 meters Carl felt a wave of power smash into his mind before gliding smoothly off his power matrix, the 27 focal points that he had arranged to resemble the Chaos Dragon. The power hit him, glided across his mind, and then seemed to vanish. But not without a trace. Carl felt the mana change and shift as it was pulled into the chaos plane by the power matrix. That was how mana could be manipulated to empower the randomness of chaos. He understood now. Fundamental rule comprehension chaos 2% 8%. Kara whistled in appreciation. One single mental attack had been enough to let Carl understand that much of the truth of chaos. She should have devoted herself to messing with him more often instead of slacking off and having fun. They could have had a chaos-empowered Carl by now. Carl landed beside the dungeon portal, then hesitated. He could feel the power emanating from the portal, and it felt like undeath. The mana suppression was there, but it had been twisted and perverted. I think it's glitched. Just dragon breath it, Hawk suggested. Carl didn't actually know how to use dragon breath, though it was presumably a function of the avatar form. Dragons contained a gland or something that let them use their breath weapon without affecting mana reserves, so it should be biological. Who knew that middle school science would be useful at totem rank? Carl focused on his mouth and found that there was some sort of thing there. And when he focused on it, energy built. So when the energy peaked, Carl unleashed the wave of dragon breath on the dungeon portal, and instantly the energy signature changed. From undeath it went to vibrant life, but only within the dungeon itself. Outside it was still draining every single bit of mana from its environment with the aggressive strength of the mana suppression. Well, here goes nothing. Hopefully it's safer on the inside. Carl joked while Kara cheered him on. Even if it ended badly, it would probably be fine, she decided. After all, it was virtually impossible to truly kill a creature of chaos. Her body could be vaporized into nothingness, and she would simply reform using the combination of Void Body and Chaos Beast Constitution in a matter of days. So logically the same should be true of the Carl. Probably. Dragons weren't quite as cool as badgers, so it might take him a year. But not more than that. After all, he was the Carl. Carl shook his head in dismay at her twisted logic, then stepped inside the dungeon. And realized that it wasn't a dungeon at all. The interior of the space expanded to the horizon, but Carl's senses said that this was actually a tiny world, created by someone at the mythic rank. Unholy energy filled the space along with a miasma of undeath. But starting at the entrance, life was beginning to spread where Carl's breath weapon had poured through the portal. World dragons breathe life? Tion asked, confused by what he was seeing. Maybe it was intended to nullify? Opal suggested. The aura of undeath didn't feel like it belonged here. So perhaps Carl's breath just wiped out the extra energy and the space was starting to heal? Carl focused and tried again. A wave of golden energy flowed over the space, dispelling the miasma and causing flowers to bloom and grass to grow in its wake. A small bush started to bloom, then sprouted berries, ripening in seconds. It really does make things grow. That's a good trick. If you use it on the Dana Mage, could we get baby Dana Mages? Hawk asked. You want baby Dana Mages? Tion asked, not sure why his older brother was so excited. We can teach them all to use fire magic. Fluffy baby foxes with even better magic. Hawk elaborated. Tion thought about Hawk's proposal. No, holy magic was still definitely superior to fire magic. But if they had both holy and fire magic, cut it out. You're distracting me. Help look for whatever is causing the suppression effect. It's just as strong here as it was outside. Carl warned. Fine. But we're petitioning for baby Dana Mages as soon as possible. Chapter 1192. Lost World. The world dragon breath spread through the space like a morning fog, dispersing the corrupt energy and leaving only pure unholy energy along with the suppression effect. Now it wasn't trying to kill Carl, which was an improvement. But the space still felt wrong, and there was no sign of the creator. There was no way that he would have missed the fact that strangers had entered his space, but he hadn't taken any action to try to eject Carl from the space. Kara flew out of her space, exploring the new environment, and then called for Carl to join her. Hey, fly over here. I found a guy. That was promising. Carl flew over to where Kara was circling a stone platform on a mountaintop which had been created from precisely cut stones carved with layer upon layer of runes. The stone of the mountain wasn't actually one piece. It had been stacked, each slice of stone as thin as a wafer and inscribed with protective runes and spells. Some of them Carl knew. Some he didn't recognize. But there were a few things that he could say for sure. First, the man in the middle was a four-armed giant of the Titan clan who had failed an attempt to ascend to immortality. Second, the other bodies had been giants but also lich lords when they were alive. The undead aura was unmistakable, and their shattered phylacteries were still sitting in front of them. What exactly had transpired during the failed ascension Carl couldn't say for sure. But it appeared that they had tried to do it while the mana of the world was too thin and their preparations had proven too weak to handle the tribulation lightning. The scorch marks from repeated lightning bolts had shattered most of the top layers of stone and left the man in the center as nothing more than charred bones in a pile. Well, that explains most of the issues in the aura of this place. Now, where did they leave the item that is causing the suppression? Once we find that, we can work on disabling it. Carl muttered to himself. Kara looked up from where she was rifling through the pockets of the deceased. Right, they had come here for a specific shiny thing. Oh, it was probably that stick in the cloth pile. Victorious Kara held up the scepter that the failed immortal had been holding, then frowned when she realized that it was melted on the end. It had taken a direct hit with tribulation lightning, and it was complete scrap with the top nearly melted off. Not her problem. Carl took the damaged immortal rank magical item and sighed. That thing was completely useless now, and it was stuck at full output with the control portion of the inscriptions melted. The best that they could hope to do was to destroy it and wait for the effect to fade. Carl examined the runes on the scepter, trying to work out a method to deactivate it, as destroying it would not be easy. The damage didn't make it easy, but after a few minutes of work Carl came across a partially intact phrase that only made things more concerning. Control wand. Runic array. Link to the divine. Call down the ascended. Once again Carl sent his mind to probe the mountain. The item wasn't causing the suppression effect. It was the controller for the effect, and presumably had come with instructions on how to make the suppression array. The top layers of the array had been shattered by the tribulation lightning, leaving it only partially functional, but Opal was developing a great mental image of how things must have gone down. She wasn't sure why they had thought that the array was intended to mitigate the damage from the tribulation lightning. But it had certainly failed at that. Or perhaps it had done that as well before it was broken. No, the bronze dragon said that the giants knew what they were doing when the suppression effect started. So this person had obtained it later, intending to use it as a way to become immortal. There was too much dumb in one spot. This show would have to be a comedy. Carl, was this his space? She asked, trying to form a proper setting for when she performed the play for others. Now that the miasma was clearing, Carl was able to focus on the lingering mana that wasn't coming from the damaged scepter and the mountain. The magic of the mountain was different from the magic of the rest of the tiny world, and there were multiple layers of spells cast over the landscape. This place had been used by generations of giants after it was created. Possibly by a clan or sect. No, he didn't make this place, and he didn't make the mountain. Assuming that the dead titan who was holding the scepter was the last one to use it. It might be possible that a new leader took over and misunderstood the nature of the artifact. You should never try to ascend while sitting on a suppression artifact. If anything, you would want something that enhances your own strength and regeneration. There is some brilliant rune work here though. Look at how these layers of protective runes are used to link the other effects together, so that they serve as a buffer that keeps mana in a form that is nearly inaccessible instead of targeting living things in range. It would be too easy for the powerful to simply shrug off the effect completely if it targeted them. But in this way they altered the mana of the continent in a fundamental way. Carl explained. He's having a nerd moment. Let him think, and he will realize something about mana manipulation. Kara guessed with an air of authority, as if she had foreseen the outcome. Carl chuckled at the thought of Kara acting like the responsible elder to her little brother and sister. But Hawk did not understand the concept and didn't care about it, so he didn't stop her from helping. Chapter 1193. Understanding Mana. Carl curled his enormous draconic body around the platform as he meditated about the different ways that the mana of this continent had been altered to become more suitable to the giants' goals. Before the whole process had gone haywire after the mountain was damaged by tribulation lightning, that was. Seeing that he was going to be delayed, the epic guard went to warn Dana that she could keep playing with Button for the night. Carl was in the middle of meditating to understand something, and he was guaranteed to forget to go to bed. That made both Dana and the little dragon laugh. It was easy to lose track of time while meditating. But she would drag him to bed in a day or two if he hadn't finished what he was doing. Usually it didn't take too long before he understood what he was working on and returned to the present. But she had only the vague description from the epic guard to tell her what was going on outside. Carl had sealed the tiny world as he traveled so that they weren't subjected to the suppression. That would damage the crops at the very least and might seriously injure some of the residents at worst. Kara flopped down on Carl's head as he worked out how to fix what had been done with the mana, or at least enough of the damaged runes of the mountain to turn the effect off. Maybe Kara's plan of just yeet it into another reality and make it someone else's problem wasn't a terrible idea. Even if Carl altered the entrance to this tiny world and closed it tight, the effect should remain contained. The issue would be that if he closed it from outside and the effect wasn't contained, it would be nearly impossible to get back inside to try again. He was lost in the runic layers of the mountain, but Carl was slowly understanding more of the fundamental laws of mana manipulation and where the person who had created this array had failed. They hadn't failed to become an immortal because they hadn't prepared properly or because they had been too weak. They had failed because they didn't understand. According to the immortal regent and Matilda, you needed to fully comprehend a fundamental rule of reality before you could become an immortal. And whoever had created this mountain had not. There were clear flaws in the design that were visible to someone with even the limited knowledge that Carl possessed. So he started to rebuild the array in his mind. Layer by layer he fixed the flaws as if he were editing a skill book that had been written incorrectly. For nearly an entire day, he studied the layers, leaving only the damaged portions at the top for him to fill in. By that point the answers were obvious, as the top layers were only the control layers of the spell. Carl rebuilt them in the way that he thought would be best if he were the one creating the spell, and then the system flashed a notice in his mind. Spell learned. Mana suppression artifact grade. Increases mana needed to cast spells or use abilities by a rate set by the user. Carl smiled and then began to remake a control wand for the spell using a staff that he was supposed to be enchanting ages ago but had forgotten about. He had to add the damaged layers of the spell to it, but when he was finished the staff linked to the mountain's magic as intended and Carl cranked the effect to 1%. Leaving the spell active reduced the chances that everything around him would destabilize, but it would also reduce the damaging effect of the spell on the surrounding area. He had done what they came here for, and now he could rest. But first he should explore this tiny world. There might be more valuables and ancient relics hiding here. They would be accessible now that the spell effect and deadly miasma of undead energy were fading. Kara spread her wings, immediately going from sprawled on her back on top of Carl's draconic head to crouched and ready to pounce. Then she raced off to explore. On his behalf, of course. Not even Tion bought that line. The little divine fox did come out to explore this strange place though. His big sister had already checked it for hidden dangers, and it had strange mana in it that might help him understand something about what it took to reach the mythic rank. Unlike humans and most other species, an innately divine beast would naturally understand the fundamental rule that they had highest affinity for as they grew and approached the immortal rank. So Tion didn't see much need to study. But the Carl was doing it and Sister Kara was doing it. Even Hawk and Opal did it in their own ways. So he felt that he should too, or he might get stuck waiting for his tiny body to mature. He didn't need to be big. Being powerful while still small and adorable was good too. There was no holy energy here at all. Not even a flicker of the divine existed. But the unholy energy was strong, and by analyzing what it was not he could determine a bit more about the nature of what holy energy was. So there was no responsible person present to remind Carl that he was supposed to be joining Dana for the evening, or even that an entire day had passed with him and the beasts simply meditating on the truths of the universe. The only reason that he did finally snap out of his deeply focused state was that a hunger pang hit and he was reminded that he hadn't eaten in some time. There should be food in the tiny world house's pantry, and now that he was paying attention to the time, he was quite sure that he had been neglecting his bride. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.